Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. It is the beginning of former president. We've got to say that it's very confusing. Former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial in the U.S. Senate today. It's never happened before. This is history in the making, and there's probably a reason why it hasn't happened before. And joining us on the phones to talk about the impeachment trial and everything else that's going on in Washington, D.C., the senior senator from the great state of Texas. Always a pleasure to visit with Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show. Senator, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I guess we'll start off with just your thoughts going into the impeachment trial today of a former president.
Well, I can't help but think about what you said just a moment ago, which is here in our history there will have been 4 impeachment trials, and 2 of them have been in the last year involving the same person. This is the first time that it involves a former president. Never happened before. The Constitution itself does not provide for the trial of a former president, but this being, by and large, I think, a political exercise, our Democratic colleagues are in the driver's seat, and they intend to see it through.
To me, this is a sham. It's a show. It's something that is not, to me, constitutional. I mean, do you see it the same way? Is this even a constitutional trial?
Well, the Constitution is silent when it comes to this, so I don't know where the claimed authority comes from. It's as if they're making it up as they go along. And I think there's a lot of concerns. I think today the first 4 hours of the trial is going to be legal arguments over the constitutionality of this entire process. Unfortunately, 51 senators can determine whether the trial proceeds or whether it ends there. Senator Rand Paul offered a point of order earlier where 45 senators questioned the constitutionality of this, but I don't know whether the 51 will be there, or I suspect we'll end up sitting there and listening to the presentation of both parties for the rest of this week. But I think the outcome is pretty much pretty well known.
Yeah, I mean, right now, how many votes do you think are there on the Republican side? Because that's all that matters right now is on the Republican side. Are there votes to convict the president, or do you see that most of the senators on the Republican side are going to say, no, there's no conviction here?
I think most of the senators on the Republican side will have serious problems about the constitutionality and the lack of any due process, and just basically an unfair snap impeachment. You remember that last year, the House, at least they went through the motions of calling witnesses in hearings in the House, offering an opportunity to call opposing witnesses and cross-examine them. I mean, those are the basic fundamentals of a fair legal process in our country. This is kind of more of a kangaroo court, and it's a show trial. Without any evidence. Even our Democratic friends say, well, we don't really need any witnesses because we were all sitting there on January the 6th. So presumably the senators will be jurors, will be witnesses, will be, in the words of one senator, victims, and all at the same time. It's just, it's never happened before, and I think there's a good reason for that.
I read a story the other day, and we talked about this on the air, that the FBI, who, they've been investigating all of these people who breached the Capitol and were inside the Capitol building, and there are FBI affidavits that are out there that say that this thing was being planned in November, in December, and that people were training for this in December. How can President Trump cause an insurrection when, a snap insurrection on January 6th when this was being planned maybe back in December?
Yeah, that's an important point. This wouldn't have happened if there had been adequate security at the Capitol. Unfortunately, the Capitol Police chief and others decided not to deploy the National Guard, not to prepare for the possibility that this group of people coming up there would include people who were intent on committing crimes. and they want to paint with a broad brush. We do protect peaceful protest, the right of association, the right of free speech, but it's becoming clear based on what the FBI reports were that there were people who were trying to infiltrate this group, and unfortunately, they are the ones who have characterized the whole events of January the 6th. So this should have been better planned against, and I think could have been prevented.
Yeah. Visit with Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show. But before we kind of move on to some other issues, including this, including here in the impeachment trial, I want to ask you: have you seen anything where you would personally convict the president?
Well, I haven't heard the presentation yet, but I think what troubles me the most as a former judge. I served for 13 years as a state court judge in Texas, and ordinarily they'd have to present evidence, and if you don't present evidence, then the judge would dismiss your case.
Right.
Apparently, here they are not intending to present any evidence, particularly about what was going on in President Trump's mind. I mean, incitement is by and large a result of a mental state of mind where you intend to affect a certain result. I haven't seen anything that says that President Trump intended the results that occurred on January the 6th.
There's apparently a plan B. There's a backup plan that is out there regarding the 14th Amendment, where Democrats would have to have I believe, a simple majority. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but a simple majority in the Senate, a simple majority in the House, and that they would be, if they were able to pass this, that they would be able to ban President Trump from running for office. It would go along with censor. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that your Democrat colleagues are looking at?
Yes, it is something that they're looking at and talking about. I think they realize this impeachment trial will not succeed, and so they're looking for, as you say, Plan B. But I don't believe there are 51 votes in the Senate to do that, and I think they've cast their lot with the impeachment process, and I think they're stuck with the outcome. And I think we all know what that's going to be.
So you don't think there are 50 because the vice president? I mean, you don't think there that all the Democrats in the Senate would vote for to censor the president?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Your point that we're 50-50, and if they got the vice president to break the tie, then that theoretically is possible. I don't know whether the vice president of the United States would want to be cast the dispositive vote on a censure of her of the previous administration. I think she and Joe Biden are trying to keep as far away from this as they possibly can.
Very interesting. We are visiting with Senator John Cornyn. So far, I've got to ask you, just in the few weeks that we've had President Joe Biden, what are your overall thoughts so far of the job he's doing?
Well, Chad, I've learned that in Washington, you can't just listen to what people say. You have to actually watch what they do, and there's a huge disconnect between what Joe Biden is saying and what he is actually doing. You remember on January the 20th, he talked about healing our nation and its divisions as well as and unifying. Well, nothing he has done has been unifying. It's all been partisan. This budget reconciliation process, which is basically a backdoor means to blow up the filibuster, is they proceeded on, as you saw, all night on last Friday night, and they seem to intend to do things purely on a partisan basis, notwithstanding his comments and his eloquent speech. So, unfortunately, I think he is captive of the left wing. Some call them progressives. I still think they're liberals and left wing. They're driving the train. It's Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, the AOCs. Senator Schumer, the majority leader, is worried about getting primaried in New York unless he goes along with that progressive agenda. So I think that's what we're seeing. It's not the mild-mannered, moderate Joe Biden that they portrayed during the campaign. Yeah. He is captive of the left wing of the Democratic Party.
before I let you go, I want to get to a story that came out, I believe it was last week, and made news around the state. One of the headlines here, Cornyn joins Texas business push for legislation to give Dreamers permanent legal status. That from the Dallas Morning News. Tell us a little bit about this and why why you believe this is a conservative solution for the Dreamers.
Well, as you know, Chad, the so-called Dreamers, and they received under President Obama deferred action for childhood arrivals. That's why they call it DACA. But it's been tied up for 8 years in the courts. These are young people who came to the United States as children, and they're a special class, I believe, because we don't hold children responsible for the mistakes that their parents made. So I don't believe this qualifies as an amnesty. This is, I think, an act of mercy for these young people who now find themselves in an endless trap of litigation and uncertainty about their future. So I decided that about a year ago that notwithstanding my position on immigration generally, that these were a deserving group of young people because they came as children and deserved some certainty.
What do you say to those who say if we support the DREAM Act, if we support legalizing these folks who were brought in as children, 5 years old, 6 years old, etc., that would just encourage more of this action in the future?
Well, that is a concern, and I think when you look at who you provide that certainty to, I don't think we should do it to people who have come more recently, because it could be a draw for future illegal immigration. But that's why I've always been a strong supporter of border security and enforcement. Unfortunately, ICE is now being told, don't deport anybody unless they've committed a serious crime. And so people who commit DWIs and assaults and other various crimes are not being deported by the Biden administration. That's a serious problem. But I think you can't look at these DACA recipients in isolation. I think we do need strong security at the border. We do need to enforce our laws. But I do think these young people deserve some special consideration.
Senator John Cornyn, you're going to have a busy day today. We wish you the best and appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you. That's U.S. Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show.